A 21-year-old woman tells her mother she'll be back tomorrow. 8 years later, police finally admit they know who killed her, but only after he murdered someone else. Imagine your daughter walking out the door on what seemed like any other evening. She's 21, beautiful, full of dreams about her future. She tells you she's meeting a friend and promises to be home the next day. You hug her goodbye, maybe remind her to be careful, to call when she gets there safely. You never see her again. That's exactly what happened to Toni Jacobs on September 26, 2016, when her daughter Keisha walked out of their Richmond, Virginia home for the last time. But here's what will make your blood boil. When Toni reported her daughter missing, police essentially told her to wait and see if she came home on her own. If you're already feeling that pit in your stomach, that sense of injustice that makes you want to scream, then you need to hear this entire story. Hit that subscribe button right now because we're about to expose a system that failed a young black woman so completely that it took another murder to finally get them to care. Let me tell you about Keisha Jacobs. Not just the victim in a case file, but the vibrant young woman whose life was stolen and whose family has fought for justice for nearly a decade. What kind of person was Keisha? Tell us in the comments, do you have a family member who reminds you of her? Keisha Jacobs was the kind of person who lit up every room she entered. At 21, she was working toward her dreams, building relationships, planning for a future that should have stretched decades ahead of her. She was close to her mother, Toni, the kind of close where they talked every day, where missing a call meant something was wrong. She was studying, working, living the life of a young woman who believed the world was full of possibilities. The kind of person who would never just disappear without telling someone where she was going. The kind of daughter who always kept her promises to her mother. Think about the 21-year-old women in your life, your daughter, your sister, your friend. Picture their hopes, their dreams, their plans for tomorrow. Now imagine all of that being ripped away in a single moment. On September 26, 2016, Keisha was planning to visit a friend. She told her mother she'd be back the next day. It was a normal evening, a normal goodbye. There was no reason to think this would be any different from the hundreds of other times she'd left the house. But here's what nobody knew that night. Keisha was walking into a trap. The friend she was meeting lived in a house near Chimborazo Park in Richmond. It should have been a safe visit to someone she trusted. Instead, it became the place where her life ended. When Keisha didn't come home the next day, Toni knew immediately something was wrong. This wasn't like her daughter. Keisha didn't just disappear. She didn't ignore her phone. She didn't break promises to her mother. Do you think a mother's instinct about her child should be enough to launch a serious investigation? Let us know in the comments. When Toni Jacobs called Richmond police to report her daughter missing, she encountered a system that seemed designed to dismiss her concerns. Instead of launching an immediate investigation into the disappearance of a 21-year-old woman, police told her to wait. Maybe Keisha would come home on her own. Maybe she was just staying longer with friends. Maybe she'd call soon. But Toni knew better. She knew her daughter, and she knew something terrible had happened. Here's what will make you furious. While precious hours ticked away, while evidence grew cold, while witnesses' memories faded, police treated this as a routine missing person case, not an emergency, not a potential crime, just another young woman who would probably show up eventually. The Richmond Police Department's initial response was textbook example of how not to handle a missing person case. They waited. They dismissed. They assumed. They treated the disappearance of a young black woman as if it wasn't worth their full attention. What would you do if police told you to wait while your loved one was missing? Share your thoughts below. While police dragged their feet, Toni Jacobs became a one-woman investigation team. She created flyers, she organized search parties, she gave interviews to local media, begging for anyone with information to come forward. She walked the streets of Richmond, showing her daughter's photo to anyone who would look. The family tracked down Keisha's last known location, that house near Chimborazo Park, where she'd gone to meet her friend. They talked to neighbors. They searched the area themselves. They did everything they could think of to find their daughter. But what they needed was a police department that cared enough to do their job. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The case grew cold, not because there were no leads, but because those leads weren't being properly investigated. While Keisha's family was desperately searching for answers, a dangerous man was walking free in Richmond. His name was Otis Tucker, and he had a history of violence that should have made him a prime suspect from day one. Court records show that Tucker had multiple violent charges in Richmond, some of them from before Keisha disappeared. This wasn't a man with a clean record who suddenly snapped. This was someone with a pattern of violence against women. But here's the part that will make you sick. Tucker was connected to the house where Keisha was last seen. He knew her through mutual friends. He was there that night, and somehow he wasn't considered a serious suspect. Do you think this sounds like investigative negligence? Tell us what you think went wrong. Tucker didn't just disappear after Keisha went missing. He continued living in Richmond, continued his life, continued being a threat to other women, because police hadn't connected the dots, because they hadn't taken this case seriously enough, because they'd written off a missing black woman as not worth their full attention. What happened next will shock you, but it shouldn't surprise you. In 2023, 6 years after Keisha Jacobs vanished, Otis Tucker was convicted of murdering another woman. Her name was Ashley Fowler, and she was killed in Florida. Tucker was sentenced to life in prison for brutally taking another woman's life. May think about that timeline. 6 years. 6 years during which a killer was free to strike again because police failed to properly investigate Keisha's disappearance. Ashley Fowler might still be alive today if Richmond police had done their job in 2016, if they'd taken Keisha's case seriously from the beginning, if they'd followed up on the obvious suspect who was right in front of them. How does that make you feel? That another family had to lose a daughter because this case was mishandled? Share your reaction in the comments. It was only after Tucker was safely locked away for Ashley Fowler's murder that the truth about Keisha Jacobs finally began to emerge. In July 2024, nearly 8 years after Keisha disappeared, Tucker finally admitted what her family had suspected all along. During an interview with police, Tucker confessed that he was with Keisha Jacobs when she died. He admitted to disposing of her body in a way that would make it impossible for her family to find her and lay her to rest. But here's what will make you want to throw something. Tucker didn't admit to killing her. Even in confession, even facing a life sentence for another murder, he refused to admit the full truth. Richmond Police Chief Rick Edwards confirmed that Tucker had been named a person of interest in Keisha's death. The confession came with immunity, an agreement that his words couldn't be used against him in future proceedings. Do you think killers should be able to negotiate immunity just for telling families where their loved ones are? Let us know what you think about this deal. Tucker's confession was devastating for Keisha's family, but it wasn't surprising. Tony Jacobs had been saying for years that Tucker was involved. She'd been begging police to investigate him properly. She'd been ignored. The confession confirmed what everyone who truly cared about this case already knew. Keisha Jacobs was murdered, and the man responsible had been walking free for years, while police treated her disappearance as unimportant. But the most heartbreaking part, Tucker disposed of Keisha's body in such a way that her family may never be able to bring her home. While police failed her daughter, Tony Jacobs never stopped fighting. For nearly 8 years, she kept Keisha's case alive through sheer determination and a mother's love. She organized vigils. She spoke to media outlets. She created social media campaigns. She never let Richmond forget that her daughter was still missing, still deserved justice, still mattered. Can you imagine carrying that weight for 8 years? Never knowing for certain what happened to your child, but knowing in your heart that she was gone, fighting a system that seemed designed to ignore you? In May 2024, before Tucker's confession became public, Tony posted on social media that she knew her daughter was no longer with them. After years of hoping, of fighting, of refusing to give up, she finally had to accept what she'd feared all along. "I would like to thank you for your love and prayers for the past 7.5 years, she wrote. "My heart is broken and so heavy right now. I am sad to say my baby Keisha is no longer with us." Think about the strength it took to write those words, the courage it took to keep fighting when everyone else seemed to give up. Tony Jacobs deserved better from her police department. She deserved investigators who would take her concerns seriously from day one. She deserved a system that valued her daughter's life enough to properly investigate her disappearance. What do you think it says about our justice system when a mother has to fight for 8 years just to get police to take her daughter's murder seriously? Keisha Jacobs' case is about more than just one missing woman or one failed investigation. It's about a pattern of systemic failures that disproportionately affects young black women and their families. Missing white woman syndrome, the media phenomenon where missing white women receive significantly more coverage than missing women of color, played a role in this case. While Keisha's disappearance was covered by local media, it didn't receive the sustained attention that might have generated crucial tips. But the media wasn't the only problem. The police response was inadequate from the very beginning. Studies show that missing persons cases involving black women are less likely to receive immediate, intensive investigation. They're more likely to be dismissed as runaways or voluntary disappearances. They're less likely to get the resources needed to solve them quickly. Do you think race played a role in how this case was handled? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. The Richmond Police Department's handling of Keisha's case fits this pattern perfectly. A young black woman goes missing, and instead of treating it as an emergency, they treat it as routine. Instead of immediately investigating the obvious suspect, they wait. Instead of following up on leads, they let the case grow cold. And while they waited, a killer went free to strike again. Even with Tucker's confession, there are still questions about Keisha Jacobs' case that demand answers. Why wasn't Tucker investigated as a suspect from the beginning? He had a history of violence. He was connected to the location where Keisha was last seen, and he knew her through mutual friends. What more did police need to at least question him thoroughly? What evidence was lost during the years of inadequate investigation? How many witnesses moved away or died? How much physical evidence degraded? What surveillance footage was deleted? Could Ashley Fowler's murder have been prevented? If Tucker had been properly investigated in 2016, would he have been in prison instead of free to kill again in Florida? Are there other victims? Tucker's pattern of violence and his ability to evade justice for so long raises the question of whether other women were harmed while he was free. What changes have been made to prevent this from happening again? Has the Richmond Police Department changed its protocols for missing persons cases? Are they taking disappearances of women of color more seriously now? What do you think should happen to the investigators who failed this case? Should there be consequences for their inaction? One of the most frustrating aspects of this case is that many of the tools needed to solve it properly existed in 2016, but they weren't used effectively. Cell phone data analysis could have tracked Keisha's movements and identified who she was with. Social media analysis could have revealed threats or concerning communications. Surveillance cameras in the area could have captured crucial evidence. But none of these tools matter if police don't use them, don't follow up on what they reveal, or don't take the case seriously enough to deploy them. Today, advances in forensic technology, DNA analysis, and digital investigation techniques offer new possibilities for cold cases. But for Keisha's case, the confession may be the only resolution her family ever gets. The most advanced technology in the world can't bring back the years of investigation that were lost to indifference. While the justice system failed Keisha Jacobs, her community didn't forget her. Local activists, true crime enthusiasts, and ordinary citizens who cared about justice kept her case alive. Social media campaigns shared her photo and story. Podcast hosts and YouTube creators covered her case. Community members organized search efforts and memorial events. This case shows the power of community activism and citizen journalism in forcing accountability from law enforcement. The attention generated by people who cared enough to keep talking about Keisha's case may have contributed to the eventual breakthrough. When the public doesn't let a case die, it creates pressure for action. Have you ever shared a missing persons post on social media? Did you know that simple action might help save a life? Keisha Jacobs' case represents thousands of missing women whose cases don't get the attention they deserve. According to the FBI, there are over 90,000 active missing persons cases in the United States at any given time. Many of them involve women of color whose disappearances are treated as low priority. Every one of those cases represents a family like Tony Jacobs, people who love someone, who are desperate for answers, who deserve better from their justice system. The disparities in how missing persons cases are handled, based on race, class, and geography, are well documented. But documentation isn't enough. These cases need action, resources, and investigators who care enough to do their jobs properly. What can we do as a society to ensure that every missing person gets the investigation they deserve? Today, Otis Tucker is serving a life sentence for Ashley Fowler's murder. He's admitted to being present when Keisha Jacobs died and disposing of her body. But he's never been charged with her murder. The case remains technically open, but with Tucker's confession and immunity deal, it's unclear whether criminal charges will ever be filed. Toni Jacobs continues to advocate for missing persons and their families. Her 8-year fight for justice has made her a voice for other families dealing with similar tragedies. The Richmond Police Department continues to handle missing persons cases. Whether they've learned anything from their failures in Keisha's case remains to be seen. And somewhere, Keisha Jacobs' remains are still waiting to be found and brought home to her family. Keisha Jacobs' case isn't over. While Tucker's confession provided some answers, it didn't provide justice. Her family deserves more than a killer's partial admission of guilt in exchange for immunity. They deserve criminal charges. They deserve a trial. They deserve the full truth about what happened to their daughter. The broader fight for justice in missing persons cases continues as well. Every time we share a missing person's photo, every time we pressure police to take cases seriously, every time we refuse to let cases be forgotten, we're fighting for justice. What will you do to honor Keisha's memory? How will you help ensure that other families don't have to endure what Toni Jacobs went through? Share this story. The more people who know about systemic failures in missing persons cases, the more pressure there is for change. Support organizations that advocate for missing persons and their families. Groups like the Black and Missing Foundation work specifically to address disparities in how cases are handled. Pay attention to missing persons cases in your area. Share social media posts. Keep your eyes open. Report anything suspicious to police. Demand accountability from your local law enforcement. Ask hard questions about how missing persons cases are handled and what resources are allocated to them. Remember their names: Keisha Jacobs, Ashley Fowler, and the thousands of other women whose cases don't get the attention they deserve. 8 years after Keisha Jacobs walked out of her mother's house for the last time, her case finally has some answers. But answers aren't the same as justice, and justice isn't the same as prevention. We owe it to Keisha, to Ashley Fowler, to Toni Jacobs, and to every family dealing with a missing loved one to do better. We need police departments that take every missing person seriously from day one. We need media that gives equal coverage to all missing persons, regardless of race or class. We need communities that don't let cases be forgotten. We need a justice system that works for everyone. The search for answers continues, and hope never dies. If unsolved mysteries like this move you, stories of young women whose lives were cut short, families who refuse to give up, and the belief that truth will eventually surface, then you're exactly where you belong. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something and you believe answers are still out there. And listen, if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Every single week, we dive deep into cases that law enforcement gave up on, stories that mainstream media won't touch, and mysteries that deserve answers. Your subscription literally helps us investigate more cases, reach more families, and maybe, just maybe, help solve these crimes. We're not just telling stories here, we're fighting for justice, one case at a time. Subscribe right now and join our growing army of truth seekers who refuse to let these cases die in forgotten file cabinets. Hit that notification bell because you won't want to miss what we uncover next. Some of these revelations will absolutely blow your mind. And please share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who might hold a piece of the puzzle. What detail in this case bothered you the most? What do you think investigators should have done differently? Do you have theories about what really happened? Let us know in the comments below. Your perspective might be exactly what's needed to crack this case. Do you have information about this case? Don't hesitate to contact the Richmond Police Department. Even the smallest detail could be the breakthrough investigators need. What unsolved mystery should we explore next? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, remember, The search for answers continues, and every case deserves to be solved. If you or someone you know has information about Keisha Jacobs' disappearance, please contact the Richmond Police Department at 804-646-5100 or submit an anonymous tip online. Your call could bring a family the answers they've been waiting for.